So thank you so much, Brinda, for allowing us to conduct this interview today.
Thank you, Falguni, for inviting me.
Pleasure.
It's my pleasure too.
What do you think of the architect's role today vis-a-vis when you started off 40 years ago?
In my mind, the role of the architect was always very clear to me. As architects, we create an environment, a space for people to live, to work, to enjoy, sometimes they suffer. So our role is extremely important.
And to the second question, how do you think the architect is viewed today?
I think, unfortunately, the role of the architect is not understood by society at large. So, how do we influence society? Who needs us? People will know about us and they will perceive us as somebody important for them only if they interact with us. But we interact mainly with whom? Perhaps just in the urban areas. Few of us might go into the rural areas. But how many people really use an architect? So it's undervalued, it's underpaid, which is very unfortunate.
So, do you tend to think that people view architects as just a means to an end? End could be more commercial than aesthetic.
I think the thinking process of builders could change in the sense that they are very important in an urban scenario. And I think it's a great pity if they cannot work with architects like us as well to come out with something that's meaningful and not just look at the bottom line. I think that's what will make our cities much more livable as against what we see.
What made you go into conservation?
I always believe that conservation is just a part of an architectural practice. We live in a country like India, which has 10,000 listed monuments. We have hundreds of thousands of existing buildings, which can be recycled, retrofitted, restored, repaired. We cannot afford for this embodied energy to be dissipated.
Right.
So the word conservation goes way beyond conserving a heritage or colonial building.
Right.
It is actually a sustainable practice.
Just to kind of take a leaf from what is happening in other countries, they are conserving their monuments and their trade and tourism and all that is flourishing through just what they already have. Is the government inclined to understand this, and can we do more with this in order to make this into something which is even commercially a better proposition?
See, we have to go beyond the government because our inheritance, architectural and cultural, is so enormous. It spans 5,000 years. So it cannot just be left to the government. But I read recently in the recent budget that's come out that the government has supposedly given a certain allocation of funds to the ASI and to various archaeological monuments. So there is an awareness coming in, no doubt, and I hope it will continue to repair and restore all buildings, secular buildings, buildings of every faith, buildings of every culture, because that is our inheritance.
Right. When you started off, Brinda, the country was at a different stage of evolution. Where we are today is vastly different. I want your take on, how materials have evolved.
The change is enormous. I began my practice in the late 70s, 80s. We were not open to any global connections. We were very insulated. I remember going from street to street in Mumbai, looking for materials, whether it was a tile, whether it was a light. It was so difficult.
Right.
And today I cannot even meet the hundreds of vendors who come with so many different types of materials. So the whole world has opened up.
Right.
There is just no comparison.
What do you think of the extensive use of glass today?
See, I have never been a fan of glass boxes. I believe we come from a relatively hot and warm country, maybe except for the Himalayas. And we understand that there are many other ways of shading. So there are issues. There are different types of glass, whether how expensive it is. But glass is an important material. I mean, there's no getting away from it. I mean, it's transparent, it's translucent, it's opaque, it can be beautiful.
So, Brinda, in the course of my these interviews with architects, they've been talking about, when work started, it was on the drawing board. It has now, of course, evolved and technology has taken over. There's AutoCAD and there's a wealth of other software available. How do you see this evolving? What do you think is really necessary in terms of technology? And how do you think technology can be used or leveraged to kind of take us to the next level, or do you think it can be done?
It's amazing. There's no two ways about it, what it does. And beyond AutoCAD, you have Revit, you have BIM systems. Now all the projects want that, and you're able to work very collaboratively with your consultants. The drawings are of such clarity that come out of these systems that you can build without error. So there's huge change.
And does this allow you to work with people in different geographies?
Of course it has. And my studio has worked collaboratively with very special firms in different parts of the world. Because of technology, we were able to work so closely.
What are the experiences, learnings? Are there any glaring differences between the way your experiences, having worked on projects elsewhere, outside of India and within?
Well, the only really big project which I've done outside the country is in the erstwhile Soviet Union, in Uzbekistan, in the 90s. It gave me a lot of confidence in myself. We were still working on telex machines between India and Moscow because all the meetings were there. I must have gone there at least a dozen times. It was cold, minus 40 degrees sometimes. But we built. And the labor, materials, everything came from India. The hotel is still standing. Somebody went the other day and told me. So that was perhaps the biggest project. After that, I've always done so much work in India. I've built, as you know, from the Himalayas, from Gangotri down to deep south, from the eastern area through Jharkhand, through Ranchi, Madhya Pradesh, right up to Bhuj and Kutch. That's the greatest gift that I have had.
So you started the Women in Architecture series, and then it went on to become, I think, Women in Design, which is part of your foundation. So tell me something about the foundation and what you're seeking to do through this.
In 1990, as I told you, I was very lonely and I wanted to find out about other women. So I decided to, write to several women and say, can you send me any work that you have done yourself? Not with father, brother, husband, son, or anything like that. Right. And I got absolutely no response. So 10 years later, in 2000, I set up the HECAR Foundation, which is an acronym for Heritage, Education, Conservation, Architecture and Restoration. Right. And then through the HECAR Foundation, which I used as a vehicle, I wrote to women again in 2000. And I said, this time, even if you have worked with somebody else, but it's your project, send it to me. And the response was hugely different. So we made it Women in Architecture and concentrated on South Asia.
Whose work do you really admire? Abroad, in India, either or both? What is the structure that kind of takes your breath away?
I've always loved bridges. So I love Calatrava's bridges. I have walked on some of them and it's an experience. Of course, a lot of the Japanese architects also build beautiful work and very sensitive. Southeast Asia and of course the Western world, which we know about, and there's so many architects over there. So it's almost impossible to name them. Mexico, Legoretta's work. I think work has to be relevant to the country. So I think when you say which architect do you admire, it's not just the looking at the building and saying, I think it's pretty. It is understanding how that building works, understanding how that building has contributed to what's around it.
Right.
And having experienced the building itself. So if I had not walked over Calatrava's bridges, if I had not gone through Louis Kahn's wonderful IIM, I don't think I want to praise an architect just on seeing something. I think architecture has to be lived in. It has to be experienced, exactly. It's a spiritual experience. It has to be for it to be something special to be remembered.
What advice, Brinda, would you give young architects today?
I just give them one piece of advice. I said, look around you. We live in a country that needs so much to be done. Take up a project. It could be even no profit project, that you do. But complete it. Do it from beginning to end.
Right.
All aspects. Learn everything that goes into that project, however big or small it is.
So you have your daughter now in your firm for 12 years?
15
15
years now.
years.
Yes.
So how does it feel, one? And secondly, how have you got any plans for SNK?
Well, as you know, Nandini has been with me now for 15 years. I never dreamt that would happen, and I'm truly blessed because it's been wonderful. For the first couple, 2, 3 years when she was working, she was like a shadow, to me. She would just come everywhere. And now, I mean, the last decade or so, she's just on her own completely. She has her clients, projects, which are, of course, together. But I have the fullest regard and respect because I believe she has the same value system, the same caring for the client, the same sense of integrity and honesty that I have believe we have imbibed in SNK. And so I am so happy, and it gives me a lot of free time. I can do what I like pretty much.
Thank you so much, Brinda. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, and value your time. And I wish SNK and you and Nandini nothing but the best and years of more glory.
Thank you, Falguni. I've known you many years, and it's truly been a pleasure for me too. Thank you.
Thank you so much.